Hey my friends, this is Bill MacDonald, the writing doctor, and a lot of you have asked me my suggested order, or what you might call a scope and sequence for teaching writing. There's two methods. If your students have been getting a strong foundation, then you can probably start teaching editing and revising and even expository at the entire essay and passage level. I call that PE, when your students are at the passage and essay level. But if, like in many cases, your students are struggling in many ways, I'm going to show you this teaching ladder for writing. It's also in my binder called the Pyramid of Learning, where the kids start at the bottom and work their way up. If you were to imagine this ladder as a bowl that has the colander holes inside, the lower you go on the ladder, the lower you're covering all of the gaps and holes that your students come to you with in 4th, 7th grade, or even high school. So let's take a look, starting at the bottom level. We'll call that level 1. It's when your students are at the letter level, when they struggle with penmanship, or dysgraphia, dyslexia, or even letter formations. They have a hard time taking pictures of the letters and how they look. Then you'll have to work on that. I suggest that you have a Penmanship Rules contract that you give your kids, and I happen to have that in my binder. I'll send that for free if you need that, because if your students write their essays in April or December, for that matter, for high school, and their penmanship is illegible or undecipherable, they will get zeros. So that should be something you would teach the very first week of school. Level 2 is going to start the first week of school and then continue all year long. When your kids are at the word level, you can start talking about spelling. And I really recommend that instead of just teaching spelling in terms of rules and patterns, that you also use part of the spelling list to raise your kids' vocabulary, because the second to last bullet on the prompt page says choose your words carefully, and this seems to be the best place to do that. Remember to stress the importance of reading softly or loudly, not just silently. That way your students can not only see the words, but they can also say them and pronounce them, so they can hear and listen to the syllables, the pronunciations of the words. And sometimes if they're taking pictures, they should be taking them one letter at a time and not a picture of the whole word. That way they can become better spellers. Have them read books and pronounce the words out loud as they're reading, so that their brain can not only record pictures, but actually videos as well. Level 3 is when your kids are at the phrase level. And I'd recommend that during the first 6 weeks that you start covering all the rules of capitalization. Here's a suggestion that you would capitalize at the word level first, which is also the letter level. The pronoun I would probably be the first one that you would cover. A central idea statement is based on what the students think or believe or feel about a topic. Then you talk about capitalization with phrases like their name, the school, the city and state they live in, etc. And then working to capitalization in sentence format, capitalization in paragraph format. And then if you're going to work on a passage, I'd recommend that you start with just one skill at a time in terms of editing only at the passage level, which my binder does have it like that, so that your students can practice an isolated skill sometimes. When you're at level 4, you're at the sentence level, and I tell the students that sentences are like streets that have stop signs at the end called periods, exclamations, and question marks, which are red in my binder, and slowing down signs that are yellow called commas, apostrophes, contractions, opening and closing quotations, and then of course for middle school and high school, colons and semicolons that would also be yellow. But once again, you would teach punctuation at the word and phrase level first with things like dear so-and-so, comma, your friend, comma, the punctuation that happens between a city and a state, and then of course doing punctuation at the sentence level, the paragraph level, and if you have time, doing full-length passages at the punctuation level during the 6 weeks. During the third 6 weeks, your students can be writing and reading at the paragraph level, and the reason for that, whenever you're looking at subject-verb agreement, sometimes you can't tell on the sentence that is being asked about in an editing passage what the mistake is in terms of past, present, or future, or singular versus plural. So they'd have to look at the sentences before and after. So that's why I recommend doing usage in the third 6 weeks. And again, first of all, you would talk about usage at the word level versus and, then usage at the phrase level, the sentence level, and then finally taking it to the paragraph level and passage level if you can. And once again, my binder does have full-length passages that are just focused on usage. Okay. Finally, in the fourth and fifth 6 weeks, you would be working on mixed full-length passages. The test takes place at some point in the middle of the fifth 6 weeks, so hopefully your kids would be able to handle that. And I think what happens sometimes, even though the test is rigorous, we never get to the passage level, and we have to try and get there as quickly as we can in the writing grades. Finally, even though passages are being read, your students have to be able to write entire essays by the time the test comes along, and be able to edit and revise them as well using some of the same skills. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a little rhyme here. Essays, it's going to be called 1, 2, 3, 4 gets a great score. So here's my suggestion. If you're really wanting to stress the importance of quality over quantity, I highly suggest that you work on one essay during the first 6 weeks. Build all of the skills that are written here in the essay over time, and it gives you time to cover all of these things because you're not trying to do an essay every week. You're just trying to do one essay in the whole 6 weeks, and you'll be adding words to the essay, adding phrases, adding sentences, and of course adding paragraphs, and then your whole passage is like an introduction and a body and a conclusion that you can hopefully cover by the end of the first 6 weeks. In the second 6 weeks, you're going to try to do 2 essays. That would mean that you would try to take about 3 weeks for each one. In the third 6 weeks, you'll try to do 3 essays. That means you'll try to get through an essay about every 2 weeks. And as you see here, you're slowly increasing the quantity so that by the testing time, they'll be able to write an entire essay and do the editing and revising passages all in one day. In the 4-6 weeks, you would want to have 4 essays. So you wouldn't be able to take necessarily 2 full weeks. You take a little bit less than 2 weeks on each essay to kind of build your quality and quantity over time. Okay. One more thing I want to make sure I address with you is when you start working on revising, you're going to be working on revising at the word level. And remember, revising is basically an acronym ARM that a lot of you are familiar with. You're going to be adding, removing, and moving words around. You'll be adding, removing, and moving phrases in the context of a sentence. You'll be adding, removing, or moving sentences around in terms of content. Remember that editing is basically the grammar, known as the conventions, and revising is the development and organization when you're working on the content. Okay, so eventually your students will be able to take an entire paragraph and add and remove or move things around in it, such as an introduction, a body, or a conclusion. And then they'll be able to take an entire passage, an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, and add, remove, or move things around in it. And following this teaching ladder for writing, by the time the test comes around, you'll be able to get your kids where they need to go. Thank you guys, and God bless. Let me know here on this post if you have any questions or need some clarification.